Disability advocates have been involved in civic engagement for years, but has it really been effective?
In this podcast series, we will talk about disability and public engagement, examine the municipal disability advisory committees as a case study for this engagement, and discuss what we can do to move the needle forward to create positive change.
Welcome to Our Voices.
Disability through a lens of public engagement.
I'm Anu Pala.
And I'm Alfiya Barilova.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final episode of Our Voices. How are you feeling, Alfiya?
Feeling great. Thank you so much, Anu, for supporting me on this journey, and I'm very excited about our last episode.
I am too, and thank you again for the opportunity to be on this journey with you. I have learned a lot. And being a person who has been engaged over the years, this seemed like a perfect fit. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as we discussed, what we thought we would do for this final episode is give our listeners a bit of a reflection and a recap of the previous episodes and highlight some of our key takeaways.
Yes, and I really enjoyed having really great guests on our podcast from different areas. We had a person with a disability, we had a city councilor. We've had a variety of perspectives and voices, and I think I've learned a lot from those conversations. First of all, the takeaway was that disability and accessibility work is complex. I think that's one of the
Absolutely
key takeaways. And then when thinking about our conversation with Amy Amanti and Tony Valenti, I think they really reflected on the importance of social accessibility, attitudinal barriers. And I think that's something that actually Karen Lai from the city of Vancouver brought up as well. So that piece was a common theme for me and something that I thought about in terms of how we can approach that from different angles.
I really appreciated when Amy and Tony also talked about the importance of advocacy from a municipal perspective as well as community perspective, because I think we need all hands on board for this work.
That's true. Yeah, they definitely touched on that. And the ways they found spaces and opportunities to work together, even though there are some maybe disagreements or different ways of doing things. Amy talked about thinking beyond compliance and, providing this utopia wish list for accessibility. And Tony was sort of like thinking about, what are some of the ways we can do it? And what the importance of the accessibility champions within municipal spaces who can support that sort of work. So I found it very interesting. Karen was amazing in terms of outlining the process of developing the accessibility strategy in the city of Vancouver and the kind of work that can happen outside of the kind of official provincial mandate to do it. So she talked about the importance of focusing on accessibility. So Karen talked about the legislation giving the city an impetus to further develop the existing strategy and the aspect around engagement, the aspect around feedback mechanism were helpful in terms of finalizing the city's approach to their accessibility strategy. So again, that shows the work that can be done both by the provincial level and the municipal level in tandem, so they can really be supporting each other, different levels of policies. So yeah, that was a great insights in terms of how this work actually happens.
Yeah, I think definitely one thing that really was very clear among all of our guests and something that you and I also are very strong about is the concept of nothing about us without us. And so this is something that Amy highlighted and Karen as well, is that, when you're developing an accessibility plan or when you're mobilizing it, it is so important to ensure that you have people with disabilities at the table.
That's right. And so you can recognize that engagement might not have been perfect, but it's an opportunity to learn from the community, continue improving. And I think Karen shared that when developing the strategy, the effort was to make sure that there were closed captioning available, scent-free environment, large print, accessible venue. But she still recognized that there are sometimes competing accessibility needs.
Yes, that can be a challenge at times.
It can be a challenge, and that's sort of, but it's in a way she viewed it. She talked about it as an opportunity
For sure.
for learning and for improving. So I think that's something. Yeah, definitely. I appreciated her reflecting on that.
And what I also really, really appreciated that was also spoken to was about the importance of accommodating people with disabilities when you're engaging them in this work. In the past, it's always looked at as a volunteer opportunity, and we really, really have to recognize that all of us, we bring a level of professionalism and expertise to this work, and it needs to be respected.
That's right. So one of the key ideas that was shared throughout our conversation was the idea around expertise and lived experience, lived knowledge, and how that knowledge and expertise needs to be recognized, appreciated in terms of, again, engagement, but also in terms of compensating people for their time and for contributing to developing recommendations, proposals, policy changes. So all of this work has been and often still remains invisible and taken for granted in the policy making process. And so all of our speakers emphasize the importance of changing our approach to that.
Yeah, definitely. So again, this series in general has been really meaningful.
Yeah, we hope that these conversations have been enlightening in terms of expanding your knowledge, your understanding of some of these issues, including issues around civic engagement, civic participation, and accessibility policies more broadly.
So, Alfiya, you have wrapped up this study now. It's been a bit of time. I'm curious to know what type of changes have you seen, if any?
Yeah, there's been a lot of work done, especially because of the Accessible BC Act. Communities, municipalities are continuing to develop their accessibility action plans, putting together committees, developing feedback mechanisms, and all of them are at different stages of this work. So the government put together the drafts of 2 standards and sought community feedback. So now they're in the process of collating all the feedback, and so we'll see what the final versions of the standards will look like. But even looking at the drafts, it was promising to see some of the sections outlined in these documents. So one of them around creating inclusive cultures, a lot of focus on proactive planning around accessibility. So taking steps to ensure accessibility before an accommodation requests prompts action. And it's again, it becomes a responsibility of the employer, and the way it is framed in the document ensures both accountability, but also leaves that room for flexibility. So, for example, one of the sections of the document focuses on policies and practices and outlines that employers must actively discuss accessibility needs with all their employees, provide a feedback mechanism for employees to comment on accessibility, protect employees to identify accessibility barriers and report accessibility discrimination issues, and make sure that people who make decisions for the organization know about progress on accessible employment. What I find interesting about this framing is that it's very clear about the responsibility of the employers, but at the same time, it does not prescribe when exactly these actions need to happen, It leaves the room for individual organizations to decide that on their own. And I think that's exactly what we need in terms of ensuring that employers are responsible and do that work and are proactive. But at the same time, it's the standard is not, to me, it doesn't come across as a like a punishment,
Or like a hard rule.
like a hard rule.
I feel like it's so much more authentic and meaningful as well, because we know that all these municipalities work differently. We know that, for example, here on the island, smaller communities as opposed to the lower mainland, right? And we look at rural communities, so the needs are different. The way that these communities work is different. And so I feel like what you just shared enables each organization to kind of be a little bit more authentic and real in terms of what works for them, but at the same time provides some, what would you call that? Like a basis for accountability.
Guidelines, exactly, some
That's what I was
guidelines.
looking for, guidelines.
Absolutely, yeah. Because oftentimes organizations might not know where to start or what is the best practice in that area. And I think the standards create that starting point. So, and I think that we can also talk about some of my interests in terms of taking this project further. I'm very interested in looking at some of the ways in which we can help organizations, help municipalities develop some self-assessment tools, evaluation mechanisms to see how they're doing in this work. Are they achieving the goals that they have set for themselves? And it's not necessarily about only critiquing the work, or like it's not looking at only all the negative aspects. But it's more about creating a culture of a learning organization that is okay with embracing the mistakes and learning from them, and then improving their actions based on those mistakes, based on the findings that evaluation helps with.
I think that's definitely work that is needed. And what I like about what you just shared is that willingness to be receptive to receive feedback.
Exactly. So one of the ways in which evaluation can support organizations is through setting up some feedback mechanisms. And I know that feedback mechanism is one of the requirements of the Accessible BC Act.
Yes.
And organizations, most of them have that by now. But I think evaluation can make that mechanism more specific.
And intentional.
Intentional, exactly. So the questions that we're asking the community, but also the questions that we're asking people who are doing the work, the staff who is engaged in this day-to-day work. It can focus on reflections about how things are going in terms of the processes, what specific areas people would like to see more progress in. Perhaps after doing this work, after implementing the plan, after 2 years, you've noticed that you're not sure whether this action resonates with the community, with people with disabilities. And maybe that's the time you check in and ask, have we done a good job in making you feel like you belong to the community? That feeling of belonging increased for you as a result of this work. So that can be an idea for a very specific kind of an indicator that you can use to measure how good of a job you're doing. That's where evaluation can come in. But in addition to that learning, it goes back to our conversation and our point about accountability. It is very important to not just to put together a plan and start implementing it. You need to do that reflective work of looking back and seeing, are we there yet? Are we at the point we want to be? And so that's something I'm passionate about, and I'm hoping to help the communities to develop some of the ways to do it well.
And what I also love about evaluation is that from the perspective of the individuals who are seeking the feedback, as it helps them to stay focused, to get very clear on what is it that we actually are trying to learn. And in terms of the respondents, it provides some clarity on what they're looking for.
That's right.
When it's too open-ended, it can get difficult to respond.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely recommended to develop very specific questions to help narrow down the responses so people know exactly what you're interested in. Because then otherwise the scope can get so big, and then in a way that can distract you. You just focus on too many things, and as a result, nothing gets done. So in order to avoid that, it's much more advisable to kind of be more focused, to have a variety of different ways you're asking for feedback. So even if you're just focusing right now on a survey, think about having some qualitative feedback included as well, because nothing can inform the policies better oftentimes than a story from someone experiencing something. And I think that's, again, that's something that can be part of the evaluation. And again, it's not prescriptive. There's no right time to do this work, but it's all individual and depends on the context. As you mentioned, maybe the rural communities will take longer to get there. But it's certainly the area that we should consider if we want to do this work well.
Well, I really want to commend you for all the work you've done thus far, and very excited to see what you come up with next. Having the opportunity to work with you for the past couple of years now, I know that you are unstoppable, and there's going to be lots of good things coming up. And so, again, thank you for everything you've done, Dr. Alfiya Badalova. And again, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Anu, and I really appreciate you helping me on this journey, as I mentioned, and helping me stay focused, because that's another...
Is that what I've done?
Because I tend to get distracted easily, and I get interested in so many things.
That's what happens, right? When people like us, we are so passionate about this work that it is easy to get, it's not even distracted, but it's just, our minds are running so quickly, and we get excited about this stuff. And so it's all positive. This podcast series has been in the making for some time now, but I think we both are very excited to put it out into the world and see how this work evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you for listening, everyone. You've been listening to Our Voices with Anu Pala and Dr. Alfiya Badalova.
This study was generously funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. We would like to thank our podcast guests, Amy Amanti, Tony Valente, and Karen Lai, and all the municipalities who participated in my research project.
Thank you for listening.